Welcome to the show. Today we are bringing you a very special edition, and I am just so excited to get into this one.
It's going to be a great one.
It really is. If you look at our title for this deep dive, it reads, The Deep Dive Unpacking Madman, Season 1 Don Draper, 1960s Advertising and TV History. And that is exactly what we are going to do today.
We are stepping way back in time.
Right straight back to the smoke-filled, cocktail-drenched offices of Sterling Cooper in the year 1960, we are unpacking the critically acclaimed first season of the American television drama series Mad Men.
Which originally aired on AMC from July to October of 2007.
Exactly. We're going to explore the hidden past of its enigmatic leading man, Don Draper. We'll look at the rapid ascent of secretary-turned-copywriter Peggy Olson and the meticulous historical detail that completely redefined television.
Truly groundbreaking stuff.
So whether you are a longtime fan looking to revisit a masterpiece, or you're just insanely curious about TV history and you want a shortcut to being well-informed on one of the greatest character studies ever put on screen, you are in the right place. Our source material today is a comprehensive, deeply detailed Wikipedia article breaking down the cast, the intricate plot, the episodes, the production history, and the massive critical reception of this show.
It is a remarkable piece of television history to explore. Our mission today is to truly understand how a show about a fictional 1960s ad agency became an absolute television masterpiece.
Right, an agency filled with incredibly complicated, often deeply flawed characters.
Yes, and framed by a staggering commitment to historical accuracy. We are going to look at what this first season reveals about identity, about the ruthlessness of ambition, and about the fundamental illusions of the American dream.
Because what this show does so brilliantly is use the past to examine the present.
That is exactly it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a season of 13 episodes each, running about 47 minutes.
A standard cable drama length, yeah.
But before we even get into the heavy plot points,
Okay.
I want you, the listener, to just imagine for a second stepping into a workplace that is completely devoid of the modern rules you're used to today.
It's almost jarring to think about.
It really is. Imagine walking into an office where chain smoking at your desk is practically mandatory, where the liquor card is rolled out before lunch, and where overt, unapologetic sexism is just another Tuesday.
And you have to ask yourself, how would you navigate that?
Exactly. Because that is the immersive world of Sterling Cooper that creator Matthew Weiner plunges us into right from the opening frame. The season spans from March to November of 1960.
And right out of the gate in the pilot episode titled Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, we don't get a slow introduction.
No, not at all.
We are hit with a massive existential crisis for the agency.
I was reading through the notes on this pilot, and they are essentially facing an extinction-level event for their biggest client, right?
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how that initial crisis perfectly sets up the thematic core of the entire series. The agency's biggest client is Lucky Strike cigarettes.
Huge account.
Massive. And they are panicking because the Federal Trade Commission and resurgent medical research are suddenly making it very clear to the public that smoking is harmful.
It literally causes cancer.
Right. It is physically toxic. For decades, tobacco companies had advertised health benefits, doctors recommending certain brands to soothe your throat.
Which is wild to think about now.
Completely wild. But suddenly they can't do that anymore. So the executives at Sterling Cooper are forced to figure out how to sell a deadly product by completely changing the narrative.
They have to manufacture a new reality to distract the consumer.
Precisely. They can't talk about health, so they pivot. And this isn't just a plot device to show us how advertising works.
It feels like it's saying something much larger about the people in that room.
It is. If we look closely, manufacturing a new reality to cover up something toxic is exactly what these characters are doing in their own personal lives.
Oh, well, yeah.
They are constantly packaging something deeply flawed, something potentially destructive, and figuring out how to make it look appealing to the outside world. The series is just as much about the lies we tell ourselves as it is about the lies these ad men are telling consumers.
It establishes from minute one that advertising is just a metaphor for human denial. That makes so much sense when you look at how obsessive they were about making the denial look authentic. The commitment to selling that illusion visually is just stunning.
The production design was legendary.
Right. The source points out that Matthew Weiner and his writers amassed absolute volumes of research on the period to make every single aspect of the series historically accurate.
Detailed set designs, exact mid-century costumes, props, even the specific way people spoke.
It created this authentic visual style that critics instantly praised. But that visual authenticity came with a really hefty price tag.
It wasn't cheap.
Not at all. The pilot episode alone had a budget of over $3 million.
Which for basic cable in 2007 was a significant investment.
Especially for a period piece, with no major action sequences. They shot the pilot at Silvercup Studios in various locations around New York City before moving subsequent filming to Los Angeles Center Studios.
And speaking of filming in LA, there is a fascinating detail from the production notes about the smoking.
Oh, my absolute favorite detail. Because they are in California, by law, the actors couldn't actually smoke tobacco cigarettes in their workplace.
Because the set is legally their workplace.
Right. So what did they do? They smoked herbal cigarettes. I read this quote from Matthew Weiner, where he actually went on record saying, doing this show without smoking would have been a joke.
It would have been sanitary and it would have been phony.
Yes, I love that. It tells you everything you need to know about the show's DNA. He refused to put a modern sanitized filter over the 1960s.
It truly is a defining characteristic of the show. That insistence on authenticity forces the viewer to confront the era on its own terms.
You aren't given a comforting, modernized filter.
Right, where the good guys act like people from the 21st century and only the bad guys hold antiquated views. You are sitting in the room, breathing in the herbal smoke, watching genius advertising executive Don Draper operate in a world that goes by very different rules.
And Jon Hamm plays him so brilliantly.
He really does. Don is the absolute center of gravity at Sterling Cooper. But as the first season unfolds, we realize that Don Draper is, in a way, the ultimate advertisement himself.
A beautifully packaged exterior.
Exactly. An incredibly handsome exterior that is hiding a deeply complicated, fundamentally altered interior.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because Don Draper isn't even Don Draper.
No, he is not.
I remember reading through the plot summary of the first season and just being completely floored by this. The massive revelation is that the suave, confident, impeccably dressed man we see manipulating clients and charming women is actually a man named Dick Whitman.
It's a huge twist.
Can you walk us through how a secret like that even happens? How does someone just completely erase their own identity?
It is a phenomenal piece of storytelling. The source material details how this incredible backstory is revealed to us very slowly through fragmented flashbacks.
You don't just get an exposition dump.
Exactly. We learn about Dick Whitman's incredibly grim early life in pieces. He was raised in sheer poverty. He had an unloving, pious stepmother who literally refers to him as a whore child.
It's just awful.
Because his biological mother was a sex worker who died in childbirth. His father, Archibald Whitman, is a deeply abusive and cruel man.
There is that one incredibly poignant flashback you see in episode 8.
Yeah.
The hobo code right.
Yes, that is a pivotal moment for understanding who Don becomes. In that flashback, a hobo approaches the Whitman family farm, asking for food in exchange for doing some manual labor.
And Archie Dick's father tells the man he'll pay him the next day.
Right. The man does the work, but then Archie refuses to compensate him, basically laughing him off the property. Young Dick later discovers that the hobo has carved a symbol into the fence post of their home.
A symbol from the hobo code.
Yes, a symbol that translates to a dishonest man.
Wow, so even as a kid, he is realizing his father is a cheat.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that carving on the fence post is the absolute defining trauma of his childhood. He is raised by a dishonest man in a loveless, brutal environment. And he learns early on that the world is transactional, hypocritical, and often cruel.
That sets the stage for everything.
It does. So years later, when he finds himself in the horrific environment of the Korean War, he is serving under the command of an engineer lieutenant named Donald Draper.
The real Donald Draper.
Yes, the real Donald Draper is a man who is soon to be sent home because his tour is ending.
And then the unimaginable happens.
Right. The source describes how they are under fire, and an accidental explosion partially caused by Dick dropping his lighter kills the real Draper.
Just absolute chaos.
In that moment of sheer chaos, Dick Whitman makes a split-second, life-altering decision. He looks at the dead officer and he switches their dog tags.
Wow.
He assumes the identity of Donald Draper to completely erase Dick Whitman. It allows him to escape the war, yes, but more importantly, it allows him to escape his grotesque past. He literally sheds his skin and takes another man's name.
The execution of that lie is just chilling. Because the army believes Whitman is dead.
Right.
So they have the new Draper, our Don, escort Whitman's body back to his family. The coffin is dropped off by train. I was reading the description of this scene, and it is so haunting.
Yeah, it really is.
Now, Don is on that train. He doesn't step off to greet his family. He just watches from the shadows of the train car.
But his younger half-brother, a young boy named Adam Whitman, sees him.
Yes, Adam sees him standing inside the train as it pulls away. Just think about the psychology of that. How does someone watch their own family receive a coffin that they know contains a stranger and just ride away into a fabricated future?
It requires a profound level of compartmentalization. He has to completely sever his own empathy. The psychological weight of that secret is immense.
It has to be crushing.
And this is why his career choice is so brilliant on a narrative level. Don Draper's entire career in advertising, a profession entirely dedicated to inventing desires, crafting personas, and selling a lifestyle that doesn't really exist, is essentially just an extension of him inventing the persona of Don Draper.
He's the product he has pitched most successfully.
Exactly. He observed what society values: a handsome war veteran, a confident executive, a family man, and he built that suit from scratch and put it on.
But living a complete lie has to be exhausting. You are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You must be always looking over your shoulder.
And that shoe does drop in episode 5, which is titled 5G. Don has recently won an industry award for his advertising work, and his picture ends up in the local paper.
That's dangerous.
Very. This attracts the attention of a man who shows up right at the front desk of Sterling Cooper. It's Adam Whitman, his younger brother, all grown up. Adam recognizes the photo not as Don Draper, the ad executive, but as Dick Whitman, the brother he thought was dead.
Imagine the sheer icy panic for Don in that moment. His two worlds literally colliding in the lobby of his office.
They meet at a diner, and Don admits he changed his name, but he absolutely refuses to share anything about his life.
He just shuts him out.
He coldly tells his own flesh and blood that he has no place for Adam in his life. He meets Adam again later and offers him $5,000 to leave New York to make a new life and to never, ever contact him again.
I looked this up. $5,000 in 1960 is the equivalent of nearly $50,000 today.
It's a massive payoff.
It is. He is literally trying to buy his brother's silence. But ask yourself, is it really about protecting his family, or is it just absolute raw selfishness? It feels like he's just protecting his own ego and the comfortable life he stole.
It is deeply selfish, but in Don's mind, it is survival. The starkness of that rejection is magnified when you contrast it with the life Don is so desperately protecting.
The suburban dream.
Right. At the end of the very first episode, after we've seen Don at work, after we've seen him cheat on his wife with a beatnik artist named Midge Daniels, after we've seen him flirt with a department store owner named Rachel Menken, Don takes a train out of the city.
And the audience finally sees his real life.
He arrives at a picturesque suburban home, and it's revealed to the audience for the first time that he has a beautiful wife, Betty, and 2 sleeping children.
It's the ultimate American dream tableau.
That is the life he is paying Adam $5,000 to protect. It's an impenetrable fortress of normalcy that he has built to keep Dick Whitman out.
But you can't just buy off your past. The consequences are devastating. In episode 11, titled Indian Summer, Adam, who is heartbroken and completely rejected by the only family he has, left mails a personal box to Don at the agency.
A very dangerous box.
Filled with Dick Whitman's dog tags and childhood photographs.
Yeah.
And then Adam hangs himself in his hotel room. It's an absolute gut punch of a storyline.
It is, and Don doesn't find out immediately. But when he does in the season finale, the grief is overwhelming. It is a crushing guilt.
And how does Don process this profound grief?
He certainly doesn't go to therapy.
Definitely not.
He doesn't talk to his wife. He channels it into his work. He takes that raw, bleeding emotion and uses it for the masterpiece pitch of this season.
Okay, we have to talk about that pitch to Eastman Kodak because it is widely considered one of the greatest scenes in television history.
A masterclass.
The executives from Kodak want Sterling Cooper to sell a new slide projector. They view the technology as a wheel, like a Ferris wheel. But Don, who is just fueled by the staggering loss of his brother and the crumbling reality of his own fabricated life, completely reframes it.
He pitches it around the concept of nostalgia.
Yes. He dims the lights in the conference room. He loads the projector with his own personal family photos of his wife Betty, his children, moments of genuine happiness that he feels he has already lost.
And he tells the Kodak executives that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound.
The pain from an old wound.
He says it's a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again.
It's incredible.
The source notes that the Kodak clients are so incredibly moved and impressed by this emotional presentation that they instantly cancel their meetings with all other advertising agencies on the spot.
Yep.
Don wins the account.
He is selling them their own memories, but he's doing it by bleeding his own suppressed trauma into the room. And the tragic irony of that season finale is just unparalleled.
It really is.
Dawn gives this beautiful, tear-jerking speech about the ache to go home again to a place where you know you are loved. On the train ride back to the suburbs that night, he envisions walking through his front door and announcing to Betty and the kids that he's joining them for Thanksgiving.
Repairing the rift that's been growing between them all season.
Right, but reality shatters the illusion.
Exactly. He opens the front door to find the house completely dark and empty. Betty and the kids have already left for her family's house without him.
He just sits alone at the bottom of the staircase as the season closes. The man who can sell the dream of family to the entire country is sitting completely alone in the dark. It is such a haunting image.
It perfectly encapsulates the tragedy of his character. He is surrounded by people yet profoundly isolated. But Don isn't the only one navigating a complex dual existence at Sterling Cooper.
No, not at all.
The first season is deeply invested in exploring the rapidly changing roles of women in 1960s America. The workplace we described earlier, the smoking, the drinking, the overt sexism, was an incredibly hostile environment for women trying to build a career.
It's just a minefield.
And we see this brilliantly juxtaposed through 4 central female characters: Peggy Olson, Betty Draper, Rachel Menken, and Joan Holloway.
Each taking a different path.
Each of them represents a completely different strategy for surviving and advancing in a society that is fundamentally rigged against them.
Let's start with Peggy Olson, played by Elisabeth Moss. Peggy's arc in Season 1 is staggering. We see her walk into Sterling Cooper on her very first day as a naive, incredibly green secretary from Brooklyn.
She's wearing a modest dress, she's nervous, and she is immediately thrown to the wolves.
The office manager, Joan Holloway, takes her under her wing. But Joan's advice is incredibly cynical. Joan essentially tells Peggy that her primary asset is her physical appeal to men.
She advises her to enjoy it while it lasts, regarding the constant sexual harassment from her male colleagues.
And we should clarify, when we say harassment, we mean relentless daily commentary on her body, inappropriate touching, and a culture where secretaries are viewed as perks of the job.
Junior accounts manager Pete Campbell, who is literally weeks away from getting married to his wealthy fiancée, hones in on Peggy immediately.
He pursues her relentlessly.
Showing up at her apartment, making crude remarks, and they end up having sex on an office sofa the night of his bachelor party.
Which is just so dark. But this raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. What is the cost of ambition for a woman in this era? Because Peggy quickly realizes that playing the game Joan's way, using sexuality as currency, isn't what she wants.
She wants to be recognized for her mind.
Exactly. And the turning point comes in a very unexpected way. Senior ad man Freddie Rumson is hosting a focus group for the secretarial pool to test out a client's product, Belle Jolie lipstick.
He overhears Peggy make a very astute observation. She says she doesn't want to be one of 100 colors in a box. She wants to be a woman who is given a basket of kisses.
A basket of kisses.
Freddie recognizes her raw talent. He actually brings her suggestions to the creative team, and eventually she is asked to write copy.
She is stepping out of the secretarial pool and into the creative domain, which is strictly a boys' club.
And her rise is phenomenal. She even gets put in charge of her own account for a weight loss device that vibrates.
I have to mention this because it is one of the season's more darkly comedic moments. She takes the device home to try it, and she realizes that it provides sexual stimulation.
Yes, the rejuvenator.
Right, the rejuvenator. And the men in the office are too embarrassed to talk about it directly. But Peggy just walks into Don's office and gives a completely straightforward, brilliant presentation on how to market it.
Don is so impressed by her professionalism and her creative angle that he gives her a raise and a day off.
By the end of the season, she's writing copy for the Carousel account. But you mentioned the personal cost of this ambition earlier, and for Peggy, that cost is monumental.
It is massive.
Because while her career is skyrocketing, her personal life is a literal hidden trauma.
We need to unpack this carefully because it's a shocking storyline. Peggy begins experiencing severe stomach pains late in the season, right around the time of the Nixon-Kennedy election.
She eventually goes to the emergency room completely unaware of what is happening to her body.
The doctor examines her and tells her she's in labor. She is about to have a baby.
You mentioned the term cryptic pregnancy in the notes. For those of us who aren't medical professionals, how does a woman literally not know she's pregnant until she's in labor?
A cryptic pregnancy is a rare medical phenomenon where a pregnant person is entirely unaware of their pregnancy until the final weeks or even until birth. It can happen for a variety of physiological reasons like irregular periods or lack of typical symptoms, but in Peggy's case, it is deeply psychological as well.
The psychological dissociation here is profound.
Peggy is so hyper-focused on her career, so determined to survive and thrive in this male-dominated corporate world that her brain literally walls off what is happening to her own body.
Acknowledging a pregnancy, especially an out-of-wedlock pregnancy with Pete Campbell, would mean the instant termination of her career at Sterling Cooper.
It's a complete psychological disconnect as a survival mechanism.
That is horrifying to think about. When she gives birth to the baby boy in the hospital, she refuses to acknowledge him. The nurse tries to hand her the baby, and Peggy literally turns her head away. She won't look at him.
Because looking at him makes it real. And if it's real, the career she just fought so hard to build is over.
If you think about it, both Peggy and Don are doing the exact same thing.
They are.
They both have these massive, life-altering hidden traumas. Don's secret past and dead brother Peggy's secret pregnancy, an abandoned child that they are actively burying so they can keep functioning in the corporate machine.
They are survivors, but their survival requires a ruthless severing of their own humanity.
That is a brilliant connection.
Yeah.
They are mirrors of each other in that regard, which is why Don eventually becomes a mentor to her.
Now, while Peggy is fighting her way up the corporate ladder from the bottom, we have Betty Draper, played by January Jones, who is trapped at the supposed absolute pinnacle of female success for the era.
Right. She is the affluent, beautiful, blonde, suburban housewife. She has the handsome husband, the nice house, and signing the perfect children.
But she is suffocating. The source material outlines how following the death of her mother, Betty starts experiencing unexplained, severe physical symptoms.
Her hands go completely numb. They start shaking uncontrollably. She even gets into a car accident because she loses feeling in her hands while driving.
Her doctors examine her, find nothing physically wrong, and suggest psychiatry. They believe it is a psychosomatic manifestation of anxiety or depression.
And Don is initially completely resistant to the idea of his wife seeing a psychiatrist. He actually proclaims that therapy is for people who are unhappy, which is a massive tell about his own worldview.
He refuses to believe his wife could be unhappy because he has provided her with the perfect life.
He views her unhappiness as a failure of his own provision, or worse, a crack in his perfect facade.
He eventually relents and lets her see a psychiatrist named Dr. Wayne. But here's the truly twisted part. Don secretly calls Dr. Wayne to get reports on what Betty is saying in her private sessions.
And Dr. Wayne actually tells him it's a complete violation of her privacy and medical ethics, but it highlights how women were viewed as the property of their husbands.
And Betty's frustration just simmers under the surface because she has no voice.
In episode 4, New Amsterdam, she babysits her divorced neighbor, Helen Bishop's son, Glenn. Glenn is this strange, quiet kid who develops a crush on Betty. He asks her for a lock of her hair.
Betty is hesitant, but she is so desperate to be seen to be valued by someone that she actually cuts off a piece of her hair and gives it to him.
And when Helen Bishop finds out, she angrily confronts Betty in a grocery store parking lot. Helen tells her to stay away from her son. Betty, who's been repressing all of her rage, her grief about her mother, her suspicion of Don's infidelity, just snaps.
She slaps Helen across the face.
It's this sudden, violent explosion of repressed anger. Because Betty has absolutely no outlet for her ambitions or her desires. Everything she does has to be channeled through Don.
There's a heartbreaking arc in episode 9 shoot. Jim Hobart, the head of a massive rival ad agency called McCann Erickson, approaches Don with a job offer to leave Sterling Cooper.
As part of the lure to get Don Hobart gives his business card to Betty and tells her she would be a perfect model for their new Coca-Cola campaign.
And Betty is thrilled. She had modeled in Manhattan before marrying Don, and this is a chance to have her own identity again, to earn her own money, to step outside the house.
She goes to the casting, she does the shoot, and she feels alive again.
But Don is ambivalent about leaving Sterling Cooper. He ends up using Hobart's offer merely as leverage to negotiate a higher salary and better terms at his current agency.
And once Don formally declines Hobart's offer, Jim Hobart immediately fires Betty from the Coca-Cola shoot.
Hobart was just using her as bait.
And it crushes her.
Yeah.
But the saddest part of that whole situation is that she doesn't even tell Don she was let go. She lies to him. She says she voluntarily quit the modeling gig because she just didn't like the idea of not being home enough for the kids.
She internalizes the defeat to protect Don's ego and the illusion of their perfect marriage.
We see a sharp contrast to Betty in the character of Rachel Menken. Rachel is the Jewish owner of Menken's department store who comes to Sterling Cooper for marketing help.
Rachel is a businesswoman holding her own in a room full of men who don't take her seriously at first. She tells Don early on that she understands what it is to be an outsider.
They have this intense intellectual flirtation that eventually turns into a full-blown affair. But Rachel isn't just another conquest for Don, is she?
No, she isn't. Rachel sees through Don's facade in a way no one else does. She recognizes the brokenness in him, but she also respects herself deeply.
Later in the season, during the Cuban Missile Crisis scare, when everyone thinks the world might end, Don shows up at her apartment in a state of sheer panic.
He asks Rachel to abandon her life, her business, everything, and run away to Los Angeles with him.
And this is where Rachel proves her strength. She realizes he isn't asking her to run away because he loves her. He's looking for an escape hatch.
He's running from his life, not to her. She rejects him, calling him a coward, and effectively ends the relationship.
She is the only woman who really holds up a mirror to him and walks away. And then there's Joan Holloway. Joan is such a fascinating character because she doesn't try to tear down the patriarchal system, nor is she a victim of it like Betty.
Joan is hyper-aware of the power dynamics, and she uses them. She uses passive-aggressive hostility to keep the secretarial pool in line, acting as the enforcer of the male executive's rules.
And she is navigating a complex secret affair with Roger Sterling, one of the founding partners of the agency.
Joan's strategy is to weaponize the patriarchal system to her advantage. She knows her beauty and her sexuality grant her a specific type of power over men like Roger, and she wields it expertly.
When Roger suggests she get her own apartment, which he implies he will pay for Joan, outright rejects the idea.
She knows the reality of her situation. She suspects that if she becomes entirely dependent on him, Roger will eventually just leave her for someone younger and she'll be left with nothing.
She is incredibly pragmatic about the transactional nature of their relationship.
If Joan is using the system to survive, how are the men using it against each other? Because it seems like the guys at the top and the guys trying to get to the top are playing an entirely different, incredibly vicious game.
Which brings us perfectly to the intense office politics inside Sterling Cooper. Yep. The power dynamics among the men are just as treacherous as the gender dynamics.
Absolutely. You have Pete Campbell, played by Vincent Kartheiser. Pete is this highly ambitious, deeply insecure junior accounts manager who constantly feels he deserves more than he has.
He comes from a very old-money aristocratic New York family, the Dykmans.
But his parents are incredibly stingy. They won't even give him a down payment for an expensive new apartment that his new wife, Trudy, desperately wants.
So Pete is constantly trying to prove himself to make his own mark, and he is deeply jealous of Don Draper's effortless authority.
Oh, Pete is relentless. I was reading about episode 4 where he secretly pitches his own advertising idea to an executive at Bethlehem Steel without telling Don or getting approval.
Don finds out and is absolutely enraged. He fires Pete right on the spot. But it doesn't stick, does it?
No. Don marches Pete into the office of the senior partner, the eccentric shoeless Bert Cooper. Don explains that Pete went rogue and needs to be fired.
But Bert steps in and tells Don they have to keep Pete. Why? Because Pete's family has extensive societal connections, and his mother is friendly with the CEO of a massive potential client.
Bert explains that Pete's lineage is too valuable to lose.
So Don and Roger have to put on this whole theatrical, humiliating show for Pete, claiming that Don actually fought with management to save his job. It's all smoke and mirrors to keep Pete in line without letting him know he's unfireable.
But Pete's insecurity and his propensity to snoop lead to the most explosive conflict of the entire season.
Yes, the blackmail plot. This is where the tension between Don and Pete just boils over. Remember the box that Adam Whitman mailed to Don before he took his own life?
Well, Pete is sitting in Don's office waiting for him one day when a mailroom boy walks in. The boy mistakes Pete for Don and hands him that exact package.
Pete, being Pete, opens it. He finds Dick Whitman's dog, tags the childhood photos, and a letter. Pete suddenly realizes he holds the key to destroying his boss.
He has the ultimate leverage. During episode 12, Nixon versus Kennedy, when Don refuses to promote Pete to the position of head of accounts, Pete corners him with the box.
He thinks to blackmail Don. He basically says, give me the promotion or I am going to expose you to the partners as a deserter and a fraud.
It's a brilliant high-stakes sequence. Don is utterly terrified. This is the moment that triggers that panicked visit to Rachel Menken we discussed earlier, where he begs her to run away.
But when Rachel rejects him, Don realizes he can't run. He has to face the music. He goes back to the office, and completely neutralizes Pete's threat in the most strategic Machiavellian way possible.
He calmly tells Bert Cooper that he has already hired an external candidate, a man named Herman Duck Phillips, to be the new head of accounts.
He knows this will push Pete over the edge. He's baiting him.
Exactly. And it works. Pete is furious. He marches straight into Bert Cooper's office with Don and spills the entire secret.
He tells Bert that Don is a fraud, a deserter from the Army, that his real name is Dick Whitman, and he shouldn't be working at this agency.
I want to focus on Bert Cooper's reaction here because, to me, this is one of the most defining moments of the show's entire philosophy.
Bert, who is this elder statesman of the agency, looks at Pete. He processes this massive revelation of federal treason and identity theft and desertion, and he simply says he doesn't care.
He literally says, Mr. Campbell, who cares?
It is the ultimate expression of raw, mid-century American capitalism. I mean, think about it. Does identity theft matter to Bert? No. Does desertion matter? No.
Don Draper is a creative genius who is making the agency millions of dollars. The truth of his identity, his morality, his past, all of it is completely irrelevant compared to his output and his value to the bottom line.
Bert then turns to Don and says, "One never knows how loyalty is born," effectively giving Don the power to either fire Pete right then and there or keep him close, knowing Pete's ultimate weapon is now entirely useless.
Results matter far more than truth.
One never knows how loyalty is born. It's chilling. It's a profound takeaway about how corporate America operates. Don decides to keep Pete on forging this bizarre, incredibly tense alliance built on mutual destruction.
But Pete isn't the only one causing chaos in the upper ranks. Let's talk about Roger Sterling, played by John Slattery.
Roger is the acerbic silver spoon son of the agency's founder. He's coasting on his father's name, he's cheating on his wife Mona with Joan, and he's drinking heavily and smoking constantly.
And his lifestyle catches up with him in a major way.
Yes, in episode 10, Long Weekend. It's Labor Day weekend, and Roger's feeling lonely and rejected because Joan turned down his offer to spend the weekend together in the city.
She chose to hang out with her roommate Carol instead. And as a side note, in a surprising twist during that weekend, Carol actually reveals she has deep romantic feelings for Joan.
Which Joan politely rebuffs, further complicating Joan's understanding of her own desirability. So Roger, feeling sorry for himself, goes to an advertising casting call, meets a pair of young twin models, and propositions them.
And the physical toll of his hedonism finally hits. While attempting to have sex with one of the young women, Roger suffers a massive, debilitating heart attack.
He survives, but it drastically changes his outlook on life, and more importantly, it sends shockwaves through the agency's clients.
The vulnerability of the agency is suddenly exposed. Lee Garner Sr., the abrasive owner of Lucky Strike, their biggest client, warns Bert Cooper that keeping their massive account requires Sterling Cooper to show Don Draper that they appreciate him.
Garner knows Roger is incapacitated and fears Don might jump ship to a rival agency. This external pressure forces Bert to officially offer Don a 12% partnership stake in the business.
Which is huge. Don is finally an owner. And it's a good thing, too, because Roger actually suffers a second heart attack shortly after returning to the office right in the middle of a meeting with Lee Garner Sr.
But we can't talk about Don and Roger without talking about my absolute favorite dynamic between them, which happens earlier in the season in episode 7, Red in the Face.
Ah, the oyster revenge plot.
It is so petty and so brilliant. Roger, feeling entitled, invites himself to dinner at the Drapers' suburban house. He gets completely drunk and blatantly makes a pass at Betty while Don's back is turned.
Don is absolutely furious. But he doesn't just yell at Roger. He actually takes some of his anger out on Betty, first accusing her of leading Roger on and calling her a little girl.
Which terribly echoes exactly what Dr. Wayne, the psychiatrist, told him in those secret phone calls.
It's a classic Don Draper deflection, projecting his anger and his own guilt about his infidelities onto his wife. But his actual revenge on Roger is meticulously, coldly calculated.
And Don doesn't confront his boss. Instead, he plots. He bribes the elevator attendant at their office building to claim the elevator is broken at a specific time.
He then takes Roger out for a massive, indulgent lunch. He aggressively encourages Roger to eat plates and plates of rich oysters and drink heavily right before they have a crucial afternoon meeting with officials from Richard Nixon's presidential campaign.
Yes. They get back to the building, and the attendant, right on cue, tells them the elevator is out of service. They have to walk up 23 flights of stairs.
Roger, an older man filled with dozens of oysters and martinis, is absolutely exhausted. They reach the top, and Roger projectile vomits right in front of the Nixon campaign officials.
It is a perfect example of how Don wields power silently. He destroyed Roger's dignity without ever throwing a punch.
Speaking of the Nixon campaign, we have to discuss how the series weaves real-world history into its narrative. The backdrop for the climax of the season is the 1960 presidential election between Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John F. Kennedy.
And the show handles this in a fascinating way. Sterling Cooper is actually working for Nixon's campaign gratis, meaning for free, unbidden, because the partners believe a Nixon victory, a Republican administration, will be better for their corporate interests and deregulation.
It's really interesting to watch them strategize for a political campaign the same way they strategize for a deodorant or a car. We should note that we are impartially looking at the tactics they use based entirely on the source material.
Pete Campbell comes up with a particularly ruthless strategy. He suggests buying up television advertising space in crucial swing states, but not for Nixon ads. Instead, he suggests buying the space for one of their clients' Secor laxatives.
Right. By taking up the limited television inventory with laxative commercials, they prevent the Kennedy campaign from being able to purchase that airtime to run their own competing political ads in those vital markets.
It's a backdoor way of suppressing the opposition's airtime. It shows how advertising and politics were becoming deeply intertwined mediums in the television age.
But what makes it so compelling for the audience is the dramatic irony. You, the listener, know exactly how the 1960 election turns out. You know Kennedy wins.
But the characters in the show are living through history in real time. They don't know the outcome. They are completely invested in their bubble.
Exactly. Episode 12 is literally titled Nixon versus Kennedy. The employees at Sterling Cooper throw a raucous all-night office party on November 8, 1960 to watch the election results roll in.
They are drinking heavily, making out in the offices, tearing the place apart, absolutely convinced that Nixon is going to pull it out.
And the episode ends with Don, having just survived Pete's blackmail attempt, standing in the quiet of his own home, watching Nixon's concession speech on the television.
The old guard is changing, both in the country and within the walls of the agency.
The shifting of eras is so palpable in that final shot. And that brings us to the meta story of the show itself. The man behind the curtain, Matthew Weiner, was the showrunner, head writer, and executive producer.
He contributed to every single episode. The source notes he was notorious for his extreme secrecy regarding plot points and his selectiveness in casting and design.
He essentially applied the same obsessive control over the show that Don Draper tries to apply to his advertising campaigns. And the result was a cultural phenomenon.
It really was. It shifted the entire landscape of what basic cable television could be. So what does this all mean for television history? The accolades listed in the source material are just staggering.
The first season scored an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 77 on Metacritic. It won a Peabody Award for Outstanding Achievement in Television.
It won the Golden Globe for Best Drama Series, and Jon Hamm won Best Actor. And then there was the massive Emmy sweep. 15 nominations and 6 wins for the first season alone.
Outstanding Drama Series, Outstanding Writing for the Pilot, and Creative Arts Emmys for Art Direction, Cinematography, Hairstyling, and Main Title Design. It completely dominated the conversation.
But here's the paradox that I find most interesting, and I think it requires some context. Despite being the defining critical show of 2007, the ratings were incredibly modest. The premiere episode hit a 1.4 household rating.
Wait, I need some context on that. A 1.4 household rating, which the source says was about 1.2 million households. Was that considered good or bad in 2007? Because 900,000 average viewers sounds tiny for a show that won the Emmy.
In the context of 2007, network television shows like CSI or Grey's Anatomy were pulling in 15 to 20 million viewers a week. Even on premium cable, The Sopranos, which ended the same year Mad Men premiered, was a massive juggernaut.
But AMC was a network primarily known for showing old classic movies. They had no original programming footprint. So a 1.4 rating was actually the highest ever for an AMC original series at the time.
However, it was not a mass market hit. It was a niche show that demanded patience from its audience.
It really did. The critical reviews reflected that split too. You had critics like Tim Goodman of The Hollywood Reporter saying each episode unfolded like a small movie, calling it an adult drama of introspection.
Robert Bianco of USA Today called it a smart, complex drama, grappling with generation gaps and sexual revolutions. The New York Times praised it for breaking new ground by luxuriating in the not-so-distant past.
But not everyone was on board with the slow burn. Tom Shales of The Washington Post wrote a very negative review. He called the pacing desultory and dry, complaining that the directors loved long pauses that just made it look like the actors forgot their lines.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the show is trying to achieve. Those long pauses, the deliberate pacing, the quiet moments of characters just smoking, and thinking that was revolutionary for basic cable.
Television audiences were used to fast-paced dialogue, constant action, or procedural case-of-the-week formats. Mad Men trusted the audience to read the subtext.
It asked you to watch the micro-expressions on Jon Hamm's or Elisabeth Moss's faces to understand what they weren't saying. It paved the way for a new era of prestige television that wasn't afraid to be novelistic.
It's an incredible journey. To briefly recap what we've unpacked today, Season 1 establishes this intoxicating, deeply toxic 1960s ad world.
We witnessed the complete psychological unraveling of Don Draper's fabricated identity and the tragedy of his brother Adam. We followed the cutthroat ambition and heartbreaking secret trauma of Peggy Olson.
We looked at the tragic constraints placed on women like Betty Draper, who are trapped in golden cages. We explored the ruthless corporate survival tactics of Pete Campbell and the cold capitalism of Bert Cooper.
And all of it is set against the monumental historical backdrop of the changing of the guard in the 1960 presidential election.
It is a season of television that forces you to look beneath the pristine surface of mid-century America. It strips away the gloss, the beautiful costumes, and the clever advertisements to reveal the complicated, often broken humans creating them.
It asks us to confront the fact that the good old days were actually deeply painful for a lot of people.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought for you to mull over. We talked about Don Draper's legendary pitch to Kodak, where he defines nostalgia as a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone.
He notes that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. So if nostalgia is fundamentally about pain, masquerading as comfort is the entire first season of Mad Men actually a warning to us, the audience.
Are we in our own romanticization of the fashion during the mid-century modern aesthetics of the 1960s, buying into the exact same illusion the ad men are selling?
Are we the ultimate consumers being manipulated by the myth of Don Draper from beyond the screen?
That is a brilliant question to leave on. It asks us to examine our own relationship with the past and the media we consume. Are you nostalgic for a time we never actually lived in?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the smoke and mirrors of Sterling Cooper. Keep questioning the sources, keep looking past the pitch, and keep exploring the stories around you. We'll see you next time.